Okay, moving on to our next hero that we're going to look into is Bounty Hunter. So, the Bounty Hunter is one of the most popular characters I read online in forums and on Reddit, and you see streams of people, and they really like the Bounty Hunter. They really like to play with him, and I think most people use him incorrectly. Just my opinion from what I've seen. I mean, a lot of streams you see, people don't really understand the basics of the game, and they kind of go in, they dive right into the deep end without understanding any of the mechanics behind the game. And sometimes it's funny to watch, but I legitimately feel bad for some of them. And the Bounty Hunter is a prime example of that. So I personally do not see a ton of value in the Bounty Hunter versus some of the other classes. I feel that he's weak. Now, the only thing I can imagine is that I'm missing some of the numbers or mechanics behind the game with the scouting, and how important scouting probably plans to be later on, as he is one of the better scouts along with the grave robber. And I think that there's some mechanics that aren't fully understood yet that the devs have been kind of hush-hush about. Same thing with the Plague Doctor, but we'll get into that later. As we look overall at the Bounty Hunter and what its strengths are, the strengths, he's a pretty good scout. He can trigger quite a few scout checks. On boss fights, he's extremely viable if you bring someone in to mark for him. However, the con to that is if you have to bring somebody in to mark for them, what are they doing? The only feasible way to really use him in a boss fight is to bring an occultist that has hopefully a positive speed quirk, or you're bringing a jester. Really, the jester wouldn't even help now that I think of it. But you'd have to stack speed on your occultist, so the occultist would go before the Bounty Hunter, allowing them to mark as their first attack, so to speak, for the occultist. So they would be able to mark the boss, and then you would be able to collect the mark. So we'll go in down to the first combat skill that you're going to take, and that's Collect Bounty. So Collect Bounty is the straight line attack that is used by the Bounty Hunter. The damage is actually below average until you have a monster that's tagged or marked, which can be done either with the Mark for Death here, or with the occultist who's using vulnerability hex. Those are the two ways that you're going to mark the target. So if a target is marked, essentially you're going to do double the damage. Minuses to the Collect Bounty: on certain boss fights, the bosses aren't always going to be in the first two slots. So think about the Necro when he starts to stack the skeletons, so that can be a minus there. Currently, there's only 3 bosses in the game right now. So again, keep that in context for when this video is being made. It's now April 2015. So some of these are subject to change, and I'll update the videos as new heroes come out and major changes are made to some of the classes and trinkets. So these are your first 2 combat skills you're going to use: Collect Bounty and Mark for Death. They're pretty much no-brainers. The only reason you wouldn't bring Mark for Death on a Bounty Hunter is if you're bringing an additional Bounty Hunter who's going to be the Mark bitch, so to speak, or you have an occultist with you. That would give you the ability to run Hook and Slice or Come Hither, similar to Scorpion's Mortal Kombat move, where he's going to pull them to you. This is going to pull the 3rd and 4th rows, again, where most of your damage and stress are going to come from, to the front. Does hardly any damage, 1 or 2 damage, if anything, to the mobs, and accuracy base really not that good late game or early game, so it can miss. Getting into the next ability, and the ability I think that's most improperly used, and that's Flashbang. So people often say, why do you think Flashbang sucks? Look at its stun base. It's 165% to stun. Great. But it can still be resisted, and the shuffle or the movement of the mob that you're trying to interchange with is often resisted, and it does 1 damage. In my mind, that's a waste of a turn. Now, there are always situations that you might want to stun a mob that's not very stun resistant, but late game guys, everything's stun resistant. So this doesn't become nearly as viable. So then what you have is Finish Him. That's another ability you're going to take. So with Finish Him, this allows you to hit any of the rows, which is really strong. So you could have a bounty hunter in row 4, and he could still do damage to the 4th row. That's pretty good. This is actually, in my opinion, the best ability that they have, making the bounty hunter fairly versatile. Hook and Slice, really not going to use. Not very strong. I just won't waste any time on it. But Flashbang is what's often misused. A lot of stuns are misused by newer players. Straight line damage is always better than stuns. I save one reservation for that, and that's with the Plague Doctor. The Plague Doctor's abilities, both early and late game, are pretty shit all across the board when it comes to damage. So, with the Plague Doctor, you're going to take Battlefield Medicine. We won't get into that right now. I'll stick to the Bounty Hunter. We'll do the Plague Doctor next, and I'll talk about what you want to do and what you don't want to do. But stun's really misutilized. So, keep it there as an option. Don't be the go-to straight from the beginning. It's better to just do damage to something than it is to stun something else, unless you're really having a bad time with your party. Moving on. Combat skills. Again, these are your 2 that are interchangeable based off your party composition. This is how we do it, is his best ability that you have with a bounty hunter. 10 accuracy and 5% crit is one of the better camping buffs that you get in the game. Really good. Again, think about boss fights. Really, really strong on a boss fight. Tracking is another combat or camping skill rather you're going to take, which allows you to be less likely to be surprised, and you're more likely to surprise monsters. Planned takedown, really strong if you're going to use the bounty hunter if you're going to use somebody else to mark, and this particular bounty hunter is going to be the one that's going to deal the damage. That's a really strong ability on boss fights. Monster size 2 means bosses. That means you're going to get an additional 25% damage. If you stack damage on a bounty hunter and you allow somebody else to mark for it, he's going to be really viable on a boss fight. That's where he shines. That is his absolute best. And then Scout Ahead, which again, we talked about it already, that he's a very, very good scout. Second only, in my opinion, to the Grave Robber. So allowing you to scout means that your party will not be surprised, allows you to see traps ahead of time, allows you to better plan out where you're going to go. So scouting becomes much more important as your health and your health goes down and your stress goes up. So that's a rundown on your camping and your combat skills. As far as trinkets, you're looking at damage trinkets, and typically accuracy trinkets are where you're going to stack. This, again, is the best combo I feel currently in the game. Legendary Bracer and Focus Ring. It doesn't penalize you with negative accuracy. It gives you 8% crit and 20% damage. It's really strong. Now, if you're looking for some fillers before you get into those trinkets, really where you want to be is you're looking at like Book of Rage probably, which is a green book, looks like this. And then also Berserk Charm's pretty good, giving you some more damage. You do take a bit of an accuracy hit, but if you wanted to offset it, the Accuracy Stone, the Warrior Cap is pretty good. Those are all early level trinkets. The Ancestral trinkets that they have currently are not that good. Let me find them. This one's actually fairly good for the bounty hunter when you're first starting off. 10% damage for melee, which would include your collect bounty, is pretty good. Let's see, where's their Ancestral? Here's one of them. So +3 speed and +15 dodge. We already talked about you don't really want your bounty hunter to be fast because somebody else is going to have to mark for him. This isn't bad. The 3% crit that you get with the Hunter's Talon. Dodge, really not that great though. And the accuracy for a range spell, you're really not going to use range that much with a bounty hunter. You should be using melee mostly. So that's pretty much it, guys, for that one. I mean, really not a lot to the bounty hunter trinkets, you're going to stack damage, and you probably want to buff a little bit of accuracy. That way, when you do collect your bounty, you don't miss and they don't dodge you. So, that's it for the bounty hunter. Hope this has helped you guys a little bit. Thanks for watching. We'll be doing the Vestal next. See ya.